So imagine taking your family out to the movies tonight. Like between the tickets, that huge oversized bucket of popcorn, the sodas, maybe paying for parking, you easily spend about 5,000 rupees.
Yeah, easily. I mean, it goes fast.
Right. So imagine taking that exact same amount of money, skipping the 2 hours of entertainment entirely, and using it to buy a permanent square yard of land. And not just anywhere, but, on the absolute edge of a rapidly expanding city that is actively projecting a future population the size of Texas.
Which is just, I mean, it's wild to even think about.
It is. But today, for our deep dive, we are looking at a document that promises exactly that. And welcome, by the way. I'm so glad you're joining us for this one.
Yeah, it is a remarkable piece of writing. So the text we're analyzing today, it was authored by a man named Anil AKV, and it really sits right at this intersection of grand macroeconomic theory and just hyper-local salesmanship.
That is exactly what makes this deep dive so compelling for you listening today. Because, well, on its surface, this source document reads like a really dense 30,000-foot analysis of one of the fastest-growing regions in the world, specifically Hyderabad and this neighboring area called Jadcherla.
Right.
But reading it feels a bit like opening a Russian nesting doll. Like you start with this massive, glowing, hyper-modern skyline, then you open up the next layer and you find the underlying economic engines, and you keep opening these layers until you reach the absolute center, and inside is just a single dusty plot of land and literally a phone number.
I love that analogy. What makes that nesting doll structure so effective is how it kind of weaponizes scale.
Oh, how so?
Well, the author starts by wrapping the reader in billions of dollars of regional economic momentum. So by the time you reach that center doll, the pitch to buy his specific real estate making the purchase feels like a historical inevitability.
Right, like you'd be foolish not to. And that is our mission today. We are going to unpack the anatomy of this economic boom. We want to explore how a city transitions from these sleepy rural villages into a massive political and financial powerhouse.
Yeah.
And more importantly, how local entrepreneurs leverage that staggering macroeconomic narrative to just sell you a piece of the future.
Exactly. So to understand the pitch, we first really have to understand the scale of the transformation he's describing.
Okay.
The author begins with geography. He specifically points back to his own college days, which was roughly 20 years ago. And he lists areas like Gandipet, Kokapet, Narsingi, Mancharavila, and Kolar.
And he really emphasizes that back then there was basically nothing there, right? Like they were just tiny hamlets, just quiet, undeveloped stretches of land.
Yeah, absolutely nothing. Yet today, the text positions these exact same areas as direct rivals to some of the most famously expensive real estate in India.
Wow.
Yeah, he compares them to Bombay's Colaba, Navi Mumbai, and Gurgaon.
It's just insane how fast that happened. And the catalyst he points to for this whole explosion is the formation of the state of Telangana. But, he uses a very specific phrase to describe what Hyderabad is becoming as a result. He says is taking rapid steps to become the, quote, next Dubai.
Right, and we really need to look at why he chose that specific city as a comparison. Because, when you think of a city like London or Paris, you think of slow, organic urban sprawl over centuries.
Right, layers of history building up slowly.
Exactly. But when you think of Dubai, you think of a sudden, vertical, hyper-modern transformation. It's this whole concept of taking empty space and basically willing it into a global destination almost overnight.
Just through the sheer force of capital.
Yes, exactly.
And the source claims that capital is definitely pouring in. Like, it states that hundreds of thousands of crores are flowing directly from places like Dubai straight into local villas, apartments, and commercial centers.
It's a massive influx.
But, it makes me wonder, when money flows in this rapidly from overseas, does it actually build a functional community? Or does it just create, a glittering holding pen for global wealth?
Well, that is the defining tension of rapid urbanization, isn't it? Are you building a neighborhood, or are you just building a safety deposit box in the shape of a skyscraper?
Right.
But from the author's perspective, though, the velocity of the capital is the community. Following the formation of Telangana in 2014, the new regional administration needed to immediately prove its economic viability on a global stage.
So they just threw the doors wide open to massive foreign investment.
Precisely. And for the author, the fact that international money chose to park itself here completely validates the region's permanence.
And the math he uses to prove that permanence is just staggering. He traces the historical pricing for a single acre of land, and it reads like a total financial fever dream.
It really does.
For context, if you're listening, 1 lakh is 100,000 rupees and a crore is 10 million rupees. So the author notes that an acre in this area used to be 20 lakhs. Then it moved to 1 crore, and people were already amazed by that.
Yeah, and a 5-fold increase is usually where a traditional market cools down. But he notes that the real explosion happened after a government auction where a single acre hit 40 crores.
Wait, 40 crores for 1 acre?
Yep.
And then he says a later auction hit 150 crores. And today he states that 200 crores, which again is 2 billion rupees, for a single acre is considered low.
Insane.
How does a land valuation even jump from 1 crore to 40 crores and then to 150 crores? That doesn't seem mathematically possible.
Well, this actually highlights a really crucial mechanism of real estate hyperinflation. See, when a private seller demands an astronomical price for an acre, the broader market can usually just ignore it.
Yeah, they just write the guy off as crazy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when the state government holds a public land auction and a corporate entity officially pays 40 crores for an acre, the government has effectively established a new public baseline.
Oh, wow. I see.
Yeah, instantly, every private landholder in a 10-mile radius recalculates their net worth based on that new government benchmark. It creates this artificial overnight leap in market value that entirely bypasses years of organic incremental growth.
So the government auction forces the market to basically skip a decade of natural appreciation in a single afternoon.
Exactly.
And he pairs this skyrocketing price with a narrative of extreme scarcity, too. Like, he explicitly points out that the government has very little land left to allocate to IT and financial institutions.
It's the ultimate formula for limitless valuation. Yeah. Institutional demand combined with absolute zero supply.
And he translates this down to the residential level, too. The text mentions a world-famous builder starting an apartment project at 50,000 rupees per square foot.
Right.
If we do the math on a standard, decent-sized family apartment, you are looking at a minimum entry point of 50 crores, which is roughly $6 million for a basic apartment.
It's mind-blowing.
It really is. When 200 crores an acre is the floor and an apartment costs 50 crores, how does the city even function? Like, where do the teachers live? Where do the nurses or the baristas live?
Well, in a purely speculative market, the city doesn't function. It hollows out.
Right.
But the author's counter-argument is that the gravity of the specific wealth is so dense, it will inevitably create its own sustainable ecosystem. And to really understand the strength of that gravity, the text shifts to examine who is actually anchoring this market.
Yes, and this was one of the most fascinating parts of the document for me. It's not just tech executives and international expats buying up these 50 crore apartments. The text claims that major political figures from all over the surrounding regions like Coastal Andhra, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka are specifically buying into the corridor between Jubilee Hills and Moinabad.
Right. He is describing a massive concentration of cross-state political power. These regional elites are essentially making this specific corridor their secondary or even primary home base.
It even notes that when the prime minister visits, he frequently meets these regional leaders right there in Hyderabad, rather than, traveling to their respective home states.
Which is a profound assertion of the city's geopolitical status. And to explain this migration of the elite, the author describes this fundamental cultural shift. He argues that Hyderabad is no longer just Annapurna.
Now, in Hindu tradition, Annapurna is the goddess of food and nourishment. Right?
Exactly. Historically, a thriving city might be viewed as Annapurna. Like, it provides you with a job, a place to make a living, sustenance for your family.
But the author declares the city has evolved into Dhanalakshmi, the goddess of wealth and prosperity.
Exactly. It has transitioned from a city that merely sustains you into an engine that makes you exponentially wealthy.
It kind of reminds me of looking at San Francisco over the last couple of decades. Like, it transitioned from a place you moved to so you could find a good job in tech into a place where you essentially had to already be rich just to survive the cost of living.
That is a very apt parallel. And the author points out that this transformation creates immense resilience. Like, he notes that even during the absolute worst economic freezes of the COVID-19 pandemic, the city's real estate development just did not stop.
Because it's completely insulated. I mean, if every major political player from all the neighboring states is parking their family wealth in one specific city corridor, Hyderabad essentially becomes like the Switzerland of South India.
I love that framing.
It acts as this neutral banking vault where everyone's vested interests keep it perfectly safe.
Precisely. When the elites of multiple competing regions all share the exact same zip code, It acts as a protective shield against localized regional downturns. The city basically becomes regionally too big to fail because the very people who have the power to let it fail have their own fortunes tied up in its concrete.
Right. But, political gravity and a billionaire's zip code aren't enough to sustain a 200 crore per acre valuation forever.
No, definitely not.
A banking vault is static. To keep land prices multiplying, you need a hyperactive economic engine. Like, you need bodies and you need industry.
You do.
Yeah.
Because a real estate boom built purely on speculation eventually collapses under its own weight. The author knows he has to prove there is an underlying physical economy driving this.
And the engine he introduces is staggering. He states the city is running on a, quote, bullet train of progress with a specific stated goal, surpassing a population of 3 crores, so that's 30 million people, in the next decade.
Which is massive.
Yeah. For context, 30 million people is roughly the population of the entire state of Texas, packed into a single metropolitan zone.
And to justify housing a population the size of Texas, you have to offer unparalleled employment. So the text lists an array of developments. He talks about electric batteries, electric vehicles, artificial intelligence, massive data centers.
Oh, and defense equipment manufacturing, right.
Right. Defense, dry ports, alternative energy, the world's largest pharma hub, and a newly launched initiative called Future City.
It feels like the city is playing, future tech bingo or something.
It is future tech bingo, but with a highly strategic card. Think about the specific industries he listed. He didn't just list software design or consulting, industries that can happen in a small office or remotely.
Sure.
He listed AI data centers, EV manufacturing plants, defense equipment factories, and dry ports. These are sectors that require massive physical footprints.
I see. So by highlighting heavy physical industries, he is inherently justifying the endless acquisition of land.
Exactly. A software company might lease 2 floors of a high-rise, but an electric vehicle manufacturing hub requires thousands of acres. So by stacking these specific industries, the narrative asserts that the demand for physical space will never decrease.
Wow.
Furthermore, it creates this narrative of economic invincibility. If the tech sector dips, pharmaceutical manufacturing carries the load. If pharma dips, alternative energy steps in.
But logically, can one city actually absorb 30 million people and lead the world in everything from AI to dry ports without the infrastructure just collapsing? We talked earlier about the lack of basic affordable housing. At what point do the roads, the water grid, and the power grid simply crack under the weight of that ambition?
Well, the logistical nightmare of moving, housing, and providing water for 30 million people is immense. But within the context of this document, the author isn't inviting the reader to worry about municipal plumbing or traffic studies.
Right. Look at the shiny future, ignore the pipes.
Exactly. He is inviting you to stand in awe of the momentum. The metaphor of the bullet train is highly intentional. A bullet train implies unstoppable violent speed.
Yeah.
If you step in front of it to ask about zoning laws or water grids, you will simply get run over. Your only viable option, according to the text, is to buy a ticket and get on board.
Which brings us to the absolute core of our Russian nesting doll, the masterful, localized pivot. Because after dedicating all this time to building up the colossal, unstoppable economic engine of Hyderabad...
Yeah, after the Dubai comparisons and the 200 crore acre...
Right. After the political vault and the 30 million population goal, Anil AKV makes a sudden turn. He shrinks the massive macroeconomic lens down to a single point and writes, "In 10 years, my Jadcherla will be just like this."
It is a breathtaking transition in the text. He uses the entire multi-billion-dollar weight of Hyderabad's expansion as a slingshot for his own highly specific venture in a neighboring area called Jadcherla.
And he draws a direct price contrast to really snap the reader to attention. He reminds us that areas like Kokapet are currently sitting at 3 lakhs per square yard. Then he introduces his recently completed land venture in Jadcherla and his asking price. Just 5,000 rupees per square yard.
Wow.
A price he guarantees will very rapidly reach 50,000.
We really need to spend some time dissecting the behavioral economics of this specific pitch because it is brilliant. He doesn't just throw out the number 5,000 rupees and hope the buyer thinks it's cheap. He provides a highly relatable emotional anchor.
Oh, the movie ticket analogy. I was completely floored by how effective this was.
It is incredibly smart.
Yeah.
In behavioral economics, if he simply offers an investment for 5,000 rupees, your brain automatically categorizes it as a financial risk.
Yeah.
And that triggers anxiety and critical analysis.
Sure.
But he actively bypasses that trigger. He points out that taking a family to a movie today with the snacks and the parking, costs about 5,000 rupees.
So he anchors the investment to a sunk cost.
Precisely. He reframes buying real estate from a financial risk into a swap for a casual, fleeting consumer expense. He's saying, you were going to lose that 5,000 rupees anyway on 2 hours of entertainment.
Yeah.
Instead, hand it to me, and I will give you a permanent piece of the earth.
You genuinely have to respect the hustle of it. Like, he walks the reader through a macroeconomic miracle, only to hand them a flyer for his own venture. Skip the popcorn, buy the future.
Exactly.
But he knows a cheap price tag isn't enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
He has to convince the buyer that this cheap land is destined to become expensive land.
Yes. To do that, he has to prove that Jadcherla is directly connected to the megacity's momentum. So he pivots back to infrastructure. He cites Jadcherla's town planning, the surrounding economic zones, and the vast national highways connecting it to the center.
He heavily emphasizes the groundwater availability, too, which is obviously a critical factor in Indian real estate. And he claims they are building an international standard production system right there. He even has the audacity to claim that the setup in Jadcherla is already better than established megacities like Navi Mumbai or Gurgaon.
Well, he is betting entirely on the model of concentric expansion. Historically, megacities do swallow their peripheries. You look at how cities like London, Tokyo, or Beijing expanded over the decades. What used to be considered a distant, dusty village inevitably becomes a subway stop.
So he is arguing that the bullet train can't possibly stop at the current city limits. If the city is going to absorb 30 million people, it physically must push outward. It has to spill over into places like Jadcherla.
And he leverages a very specific psychological trick to close the sale. He doesn't just say his buyers made a smart financial choice. At the end of the text, he writes that he is saying this with all his heart and conscience. He claims that the people who took plots in his Jadcherla venture are lucky. He uses the concepts of praptam.
Praptam.
Yeah, which translates to a sort of divine destiny or earned fortune.
That is fascinating. He makes the buyer feel like acquiring this massive future wealth isn't just a transaction, but something they are destined to receive. It elevates a land purchase into, like, a spiritual reward.
It completely removes any lingering buyer's remorse. You didn't just buy a dusty plot of land. You claimed your rightful place in the center of modern India.
What a journey this single document takes us on. Like, we started by looking at the influx of foreign capital, turning sleepy college day villages into vertical skylines designed to rival Dubai.
We examined the staggering mechanics of land valuation, where government auctions artificially reset the baseline, driving prices to 200 crores an acre.
We unpacked the cultural shift from Annapurna to Dhanlakshmi, creating a political vault where regional elites park their wealth to insulate the city from failure.
And we broke down the strategic curation of massive physical industries, from EV plants to AI data centers, designed to permanently anchor a population of 30 million people.
And finally, we arrived at Anil AKV's masterful pivot, anchoring the abstract billions of the macroeconomic boom to the 5,000 rupee cost of a family movie night, offering you a piece of destined fortune in Jadcherla.
And he is so immensely confident in this narrative that he wants his name remembered permanently. The document ends with the ultimate mic drop to his manifesto. He just leaves his phone number.
98494067889, just sitting there at the bottom of the page, waiting for the reader to call and claim their piece of the future. It brings us right back to that final, smallest Russian nesting doll. You get past the billions of dollars, past the future tech industries, and at the absolute center is one guy, one plot of land, and a phone number.
It really is wild.
It is. Which leaves you listening with a final thought to mull over today. When a megacity expands this violently, driven by global wealth and future tech, where does the real opportunity actually lie? Does it lie in buying those glittering 50-car apartments at the absolute insulated center? Or does true generational wealth belong to the people who buy the dusty, overlooked plots on the absolute fringes, betting everything that the bullet train of progress will eventually be forced to lay tracks right to their front door?